Imagine you're reading The Hunger Games, and instead of the last 3 or so chapters starting with Katniss and Peeta threatening to eat the nightshade berries so that there's no victor at all, it ends with Katniss on the podium looking at the cornucopia and eyeing that bag while all the kids die around her. Now, while that would be a rousing conclusion to put the middle context of the book at the end, that seems kind of boring. And that's how I felt when I was reading Wings by Aprilynne Pike. Now, in no way is this book boring or uninteresting. It just seems to spend a lot of time talking about what the main character Laurel is and all the stuff she's made of instead of developing a why. Where does she come from? Why is it like this? However, I'm getting ahead of myself, so Maria Von Trapp says to start at the very beginning because it's a good place to start. So let's start at the beginning. Laurel is moving into a new house from her old house. She's just moving from the woods more into town, and if I remember correctly, she's going to school for the first time with new kids and everything. She finds a group, and don't worry about any of these kids except David. There's one girl with curly hair and cherry red lips, but I don't remember much else about her except that. I think she comes back in the middle for another conversation to ask Laurel, hey, are you into David? And then Laurel says David and I are just friends, and that's about it. Not much else happens with her. Laurel is a strange case. She's never taken a sick day. She doesn't bleed. She can't remember a time she ever got a cut and bled. Her childhood is fuzzy. She just remembers playing in the woods and feeling at home in the woods. And she doesn't eat a lot. She'll eat like a few strawberries or something, and she'll rarely have a Sprite. So she starts noticing some changes. She wants to eat a little bit more and all of that stuff. So she thinks that this weird spot on her back is just part of puberty. It's a pimple or something. Her mom, who is a holistic little hippie type, gives her some salve to put on it because it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and sends Laurel on her way. Her dad owns a bookstore, so Laurel works there part-time, but that's not really all that important. It's brought up a few more times, but yeah. Anyway, this thing on Laurel's back keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it gets more painful and kind of itchy. Then one day before she's ready to take her shower, she looks at it, and there's something growing out of her spine. And by the way, it's probably a little too late to say this, but yes, this review will contain spoilers. So she goes to pull on this thing that looks like it's growing out of her spine, and it hurts immensely. It feels like she's pulling her own spine out of her body. So she puts her shirt back on, and she just forgets it for a while. But it keeps growing and growing until one day there are flowers, beautiful white flowers on it in bloom, and it's in the shape of wings. Now, through this time, she has made friends with David, so she puts a shirt down, she goes to school, and she sees that David, who loves science and learning about plants and botany and all that stuff, he'd be the one to ask. So she goes over and she shows him her magical wings, and then they spend a long time, she and him, analyzing Laurel's blood, seeing how long she can hold her breath, realizing she doesn't need to eat because she gets photosynthesis and she doesn't have blood, she has chloroplasts, and it just keeps going on and on. conveniently, Mom starts talking about needing to sell the property because of the rent on the bookstore, and Dad is starting to get sick, and he's going to need to go to the hospital because her home remedies are not helping like they used to. So Laurel says, no, please don't sell the property, reconsider. And the man that wants to buy the property is creepy and just gives Laurel bad vibes. I do not remember his name, so we're just going to call him Creepy McNightmare. Creepy McNightmare is a big, cauliflower-nosed, hideous, smelly man, and she tells David of her bad vibes she gets from this guy and how he seems off. Now, let me get to my complaints about Laurel. Mr. Creepy McNightmare is the only time, really, where Laurel continues with her first assumption and then does the work herself instead of handing it off to David. Because when it was time to find out why flowers were growing out of her back, which, by the way, they went in a bloom cycle. I guess she's part orchid, because she bloomed and then they all fell off and she went back to being a regular old human. This is the one thing that she's dedicated to, finding out who Mr. Creepy McNightmare is and why he wants the property. Her dad takes a turn for the worst and he's literally in a coma, so David and Laurel go to find out what Mr. Creepy McNightmare is up to. And they find he's kind of got this mafia boss kind of thing, and he's being real creepy as to why he wants the land. So he has his two henchmen grab Laurel and David and toss them in a river. Literally picks them up and throws them down. Now, here's the thing. We spent so much time talking about Laurel and what she is and what she's made of that they deduced she is a fairy, but the special organic kind. And while she was out with her dad before he got sick, she met a tall, handsome stranger named Tamani. And he's cocky and he's arrogant and he's pretty. Now, we've been establishing a slow-burning relationship between David and Laurel that feels very earned, but no, here comes Mr. Flashy Showy Pants, and suddenly Laurel's burning with desire she's never felt before. And I hate it. So, Laurel, even though she can hold her breath really, really well, somehow David still gets free and saves her because Laurel cannot be active in her own story, and that is one thing that's kind of annoying about this character. So they meet Tamani on the edge of the woods and they say, hey, what's up? And then Tamani says, oh, by the way, you're a fairy, which you already knew that, and we're really from Avalon, and those are trolls. That man that threw you in the thing tonight, he's a troll, and his henchmen are trolls. I'm a sentry. Let's go get him. And at this point, I was kind of annoyed. I was like, Avalon, really? You just have to pick a long, established, in the public domain intellectual property? You couldn't have come up with your own thing? I mean, even if you just called it Avelia or something like that, that would have been good too. We're out here putting an original spin on a fairy. Her wings are made of flowers instead of like moth wings or feathers or those weird dragonfly wings. No, she is an organic fairy. The fairies are made of leaves and shit, and they're from Avalon. Just a tiny bit more originality would have been chef's kiss amazing. However, 'tis neither here nor there. This book was a right to market thing, and it was written at a time when it was super popular to use long established created mythical creatures I mean, at the time, Sleepy Hollow kept just like dipping into whatever Greek or Roman mythology was just hot at the moment. It was so annoying. But then they've got to go after the troll dude. So Tamani tells David to drive them, and then they'll track him down to where the creepy troll lives in this old abandoned neighborhood, and he's going to take out the sentries. And Laurel watches from a distance. Now, here's the thing. Not only do I dislike Tamani because he came out of nowhere and he's trying to keep David, who earned Laurel's trust, and I feel more is my OTP of this book. He's kind of a cocky, arrogant shit, and what do we know about him? Him and Laurel had, maybe feelings, maybe she friend-zoned him when she lived as a fairy in this previous life, because that's what we learn later on, is that she lived as a fairy and they were best friends. But anyway, back to the sentry. He takes out the 2 guards and then he goes after for the big troll. The big troll works him over, and I just can't be bothered to feel any sort of tension. And it is possible to feel tension and feel anticipation and want a character to succeed without even knowing their name. One time that it was done really well was in the opening of Saw 4. Yes, I really am out here bringing up Saw 4 in this made-for-teens book about fairies and King Arthur's court and all that crap. Anyway, the one scene where the man with his eyes are sewn shut and the other man's mouth is sewn shut, they've got to work against each other so that one of them can live. And you want the man whose mouth is sewn shut to win. And whatever. And it's a very tense scene. The stakes are very clear. In this one, you don't care. You know that Tamani's going to be just fine because it's the first in a series. And that's where my Hunger Games reference comes in. The Hunger Games, I feel, got people hooked by having enough story that if the book ended there, if the book ended with Katniss starting the whisperings of a revolution without actually starting it, people might have been satisfied with it. It didn't end with so many questions left unanswered. And I think that's a good thing as a series, is if the books can kind of stand alone but still need each other, that's good. I have no idea how many books are in this series, and I don't intend on reading it because it just didn't hook me as much as I would have loved it to. So, Laurel attempts to shoot the man who has wounded her beloved Tamani and got her father sick and tried to steal the land that rightfully belongs to her, and she can't do it, which doesn't really show very much of character development so much as it shows plot convenience, because since this is the series, that villain's got to come back for the next one. Unlike in Harry Potter, where he's just like, I'm gonna die, I gotta kill Quirrell if I want to live. And yeah, Voldemort got away, but like I said, it could stand alone. So Laurel takes Tamani back to the fairy gods, and he goes through a big shining door, and she sees a little glimpse of Avalon, and of course it's beautiful, but it's so bright. And he's gonna get healed up because he can heal. Now David got tossed among the rocks much like Laurel did, but she's healed a lot better because she's made of plant and David is made of lame human, so she heals him. Some king guy of the fairies gives Laurel some magic juice, and she gives some to David, and his wounds are healed, and everything. And then she goes and she opens her dad's mouth and drops some magic juice in a dropper, and her dad's healed and he wakes up. She convinces her mom, hey, put the property in my name. And then she kisses David. She goes to the edge of the forest to tell Tamani, or see if he's there, and to tell him that she's chose David and that she's sorry. She kisses Tamani too. Now, it kind of seems like there's a lot of plot shoved into the last 10 chapters or so. And there was. I kind of feel the pacing of this book is off. And why do I feel the pacing of this book is off? Is because who I am as a person is sometimes I will set a book down, and then like object permanence, it will disappear into another dimension for 5 to 6 months. So over the course of about 6 years, I read this book due to my setting it down and forgetting it existed. And I want to say the pacing is off because every time I picked it up, I knew exactly what was going on and it was easy to get picked back up, which can be good and can be bad. In this case, it's more on the bad side because not a lot happened. Now, I'm not saying that Aprilynne Pike's writing is slow or anything. I just think that we spent a little too much time on experimenting on Laurel instead of maybe trying to find out her lore. And she spent a lot of time just letting David do everything. I mean, you can look up fairies and stuff on the internet, Laurel. Like, you don't have to have incognito mode on. It's okay. I do remember her looking at some of her mom's botany books, and that's about it, but ultimately, this book was spending a lot of time setting up the rest of the series instead of being interested in being good all by itself, which I do believe a movie or a book or whatever that's in the first part of the series has to be interested in being good all by itself. I mean, I say this as if a book or a movie has its own autonomy, but the creator or creators of said properties need to think about that. This needs to be good on its own, because if it's not good on its own, people won't want to come back for more. Overall, I think I'm going to stay with my rating of this of 3 stars. Originally, I wasn't even going to review this because I didn't think I had enough to say, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yes, I do have enough to say. One thing that I love about it is I do love Aprilynne Pike's simplistic prose, and maybe that's why it reminds me a little bit of Hunger Games, is because Suzanne Collins also has simplistic prose. They both have a way of making the world very clear and visual without going over the top. Ultimately, I think the book would maybe be 4 stars if Miss Pike would have just come up with her own world or her own name for a world, since she'd already put a spin on fairies. I don't know. I'm not into a lot of fairy lore. So if there are fairies that are organic, for lack of a better term, I'm pretty sure you'll let me know. But if not, I've never seen it before, so it's new to me. And it would be 5 stars if she ended up with David, because I feel that romance has been earned. He earned her trust. He helped her out. He's sweet. He's nice. He's not demanding. Whereas Tamani's just like, we knew each other once, and that's a question that I don't like. Posed at the very end, why did she go out into the world of the regular mortals if she's just going to have to come back here? I really don't like that in young adult books because it's never, ever a good enough reason. It's like they have to go into hiding, and I don't know, I kind of feel like Tamani's keeping her back. Or maybe there's some sort of dumb reason, like you have to go out into the world for this amount of time and then come back to show that the world is wicked and evil. I don't know. Anyway, pick this one up if you feel like it. It's easy to read. It's not over the top with flowery prose. It just wasn't for me. I did finish it. It wasn't like painful to read, but just who I am as a person, I take a long time to complete things.